Hi, everyone, and welcome to Haystack's event with Gearset on attracting and retaining top tech talent. I am just here to say to remember to head over to Slido, which is sli.do, and the hashtag code is Haystack to ask any questions you may have and see what other people are asking. And you can upvote them, and questions will be asked and answered at the end. Right, I'm now going to hand over to Chris, Haystack's CEO, to do an introduction alongside Gearset.
Thanks very much, Alice. So I'm joined today by Sara and Oliver from the talent acquisition team at Gearset. And we'll be hearing more from those guys in a moment. But I thought what would be useful for me to start off with was just to kind of go through some of the... I actually went back through some of our early pitch decks, and when we were trying to raise money at the very beginning, and we were looking at what the problems were in tech talent acquisition and how techies were approached. And it was funny that the pitch deck from 2018, a lot of it still was relevant now. So I was just going to share one or two slides. Which don't seem to be coming through right now. There we go. So yeah, apologies for that. So this was the very first original pitch deck for Haystack when we were first trying to raise money, and this was our first slide. So quite a bold statement. This was based around a lot of problem interviews that we did with techies, so developers, data scientists, DevOps professionals, product designers. The general feedback was that tech recruitment was broken. The dull job boards and spam messaging had basically left them a bit disillusioned with current methods. And it was a bit of a vicious cycle that had been created. So the high demand for tech talent, which we know about now especially, but we knew about then as well, meant that the heavy reliance on traditional services, they started to creak, led to some disappointing practices or poor existing solutions. And techies became disillusioned, moved away from those traditional solutions. And that's why we wanted to create Haystack. We wanted Haystack to be something different, where actually the process of looking for a new role or being approached for a new role was actually a pleasurable one, and that an individual could take some enjoyment from. So we wanted to surface data-driven insights to show what really mattered to techies, removing recruiters from the equation, and letting individuals explore the tech landscape, browse it in their own time, and take decisions based on the information that they saw in front of them. The biggest single thing that they said to us was they disliked the way they were approached. And I think this is to do a lot with the noise that you hear on LinkedIn, the constant bombardment of, essentially, if you have a software engineer job title on LinkedIn, almost feels like a sign on your head saying, send me a spam message, or I'm open to job offers. So they really disliked the way they were approached. And what was ironic about that was that these were the individuals now who held all the cards, that the actual power, if you like, was in their hands, in terms of they really decided where they were going to take their skills next. So we wanted to rebalance things and put more power back into the techies' hands. Yeah, this is a slide that we've used a few times, and I've written quite a long blog on this. That the process of joining a company now, by the time somebody hits the application button, they're a long way down the buying process, or the decision-making process in this instance. So the last 35-40% is still crucially important. Once an individual comes into contact with your business, that's obviously massive to get an understanding of who else works there, what the culture of the company's like. But before they get to that stage, they're on a journey of discovery, exploration, and evaluation, whereby they're finding companies, seeing what they're like, trying to understand what it would be like to work there in terms of tech stack or general culture, engineering practices, whatever it might be, ultimately evaluating and considering that employer as a potential employer for them. So yeah, 50-60% of the decision making in terms of joining a company is taken before somebody hits the application button. And I guess we're in the new world now, kind of post-pandemic. That new normal is what's happening right now. And we thought that there'd be winners and losers in this new world, and that the companies that did less well would be the ones hiding in the shadows, still waiting for candidates to come and find them, using outdated methods of attracting people, time-consuming process on their terms, insistent on people spending a high number of days in the office, and only really contacting individuals when they had an open vacancy. And that the winners in the new world would be easy to discover. They broadcast the cool stuff they're working on, embrace modern sourcing methods, build relationships, put candidate experience at the heart of what they were doing, and be very open to flexible and remote workers. And obviously that one, number 6 there, has accelerated in the last couple of years, clearly. So that's mainly talking about attraction here, really, in terms of this session really being all about attracting on one hand and retaining top tech talent on another. Those were some of the, I guess, problems that we saw, questions that we asked of techies, and how we saw the market evolving 2 or 3 years ago. It'd be interesting, I guess, to hear from people listening in to see kind of if those predictions were right, and I guess probably more importantly, what's changed, what lessons have been learned during the course of the last couple of years to make the process for techies looking for work now much better than it was in kind of 2018, 2019. But that's enough for me. So I'll hand over now to Oliver and Sarah.
Cool, thanks, Chris. So yeah, just a quick introduction. So I'm Ollie. I've got 6 years of recruitment experience overall. A combination of agency and internal. I've actually worked for Gearset twice, so worked once back in 2018, and then again more recently took a little bit of a break to go and train as a commercial pilot. But it's given me a good view on tech recruitment for the same company in the same situation, but both before and then after the pandemic.
Lovely. Hi, and I'm Sara. So I've spent 13 years working in recruitment, or just over, and seen it from all different avenues. So I've worked in an agency, I've worked internal, and I've worked for an RPO, MSP as well. I joined Gearset back in 2019 and have really loved being part of the growth here.
So what does Gearset actually do? So what fundamentally we do is we develop a DevOps toolkit for devs that work on the Salesforce platform. So this was an opportunity that was actually spotted by the team, the original founders of the company, when they were working within another company, and then the development of that internal tool was so successful that it got spun out into its own business. And now we're a real market leader in sort of end-to-end DevOps facilitation for Salesforce. So we're used by thousands of companies, real range as well. So right from really small businesses all the way through to giants like you can see there, IBM, McKesson, TripAdvisor, and one of the things we always aim at is catering for that wide range of companies, whether they be big or small.
So we're now sitting at just over 150 employees. We're able to grow significantly during the pandemic, and we're still growing rapidly post-pandemic, although it is worth noting that it's a very different market now than it was 2 years ago. Gearset has 3 offices. So our HQ is based over in Cambridge. We have an office in Chicago that we opened last year, and that was opened to help us become more responsive to our customers, with the majority of them being based over in the US. And more recently this year, we've opened an office over in Belfast, which is a tech hub spot in the UK. and that's been open to help us recruit a broader range of tech candidates.
Cool. So what do we do really well, or what do we think we do really well? Anyway, this is some of the things that that we put a lot of emphasis on and we think work really well for us in terms of growing. So the first one there obviously is candidate experience. Candidate experience matters. It's got benefits throughout the process. So from keeping candidates engaged, that's going to give us an edge over the other processes that they're going to be in, because they are going to be in other processes at the moment. And it makes an impression that could be the decider when it comes down to offer stage, because again, you're unlikely to be the only offer on the table at the moment. It also makes advocates out of unsuccessful candidates. So just because someone's not right now doesn't mean they never will be. And even if they never will be, actually, you still want people to be out there speaking about you positively, even if they've not been successful. And also, it's just the right thing to do. We've probably all been on the other side of this and had really negative experiences, just never got feedback from interviews, that kind of thing. It sucks. So why would you want to do that to other people? So some of the things we do for candidate experience, we make sure that our communication is fast and timely. We keep an eye on tone of voice to make it, sort of friendly and approachable. We make sure that the speed of the process is minimised where it possibly can be, with speed of feedback being a particular focus as well. We try and make the actual interviews and assessments themselves as enjoyable and relevant as possible, so that people don't feel like they're being given busy work. And the quality of the feedback that we give is a real emphasis as well. So we don't send out generic "thanks for your application, you've not been successful" type things. Everybody gets some personalised, relevant feedback that we hope will actually help them in future applications. So the other thing we do is a real focus on a proactive sourcing, which, as Chris was mentioning, is kind of a bit of a changing market. None of our roles can be filled really by just sticking an advert out and waiting. We're looking beyond LinkedIn and the usual methods now in terms of our proactive sourcing, because again, as has already been discussed, it's not really what it used to be in terms of effectiveness. And we use the personalised messaging and sort of persistent campaigns, creating follow-up messages, but always making sure we're adding information and value with those follow-up messages and not hounding people or pestering them.
Something else we do really well is investing in talent acquisition. So one of the great things about Gearset is their willingness to invest in the right tools for the job. So as Ollie just mentioned, we go beyond LinkedIn. We look at other tools that we can do in order to help us reach our target goals. It'd be really hard to do our jobs properly without having the best tools in order to support us. There's currently 4 of us in the talent acquisition team, and we are looking to add another. We have enough of us in the team that really kind of helps us focus our goals as well. So it gives people dedicated areas, dedicated time with hiring managers, and good time, enough time to focus on things like the candidate experience. And we're trusted. So we're trusted to make the decisions on where we focus our time and what tools that we do need in order to support ourselves. We're always looking for ways to improve as well. So we have weekly meetings as a team. It helps us share our ideas, knowledge and experience. So we all come from quite a diverse range background, but we'll come to the meetings, problems that we're having, how you find sourcing this role, for example. And we share ideas and thoughts, and have you tried X, Y, and Z, or have you looked at it from this angle, which is really helpful. We do quarterly business reviews as well. So every quarter we get together and we focus on what went well last quarter, but also what we're going to focus on for the quarter coming up, and how we're going to get there. And we're not, we understand that there is always room for improvement. So we're often looking at what others are doing, how can we improve our process. We offer each other feedback as well. What you did here was really great. Maybe you could try this in the future. And we're not afraid to change it up either. So phrases such as "we've always done it that way" just isn't something that you'll find us saying over at Gearset anyway.
Cool. So how has recruitment changed? This is kind of specifically looking at the period probably since the pandemic. Some of this is related to that, and some of it I think is just the way that society's going generally. So first of all, as we know, engineers, people in tech don't need to job hunt, right? They're particularly the high caliber candidates. They're receiving more direct approaches than they know what to do with. So if they do want a job, they're not going out and looking for it, and that's diluted the usefulness of your conventional routes, both advertising and things like LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn's just open season at the moment. It's just saturated, so there's kind of no point. So other platforms that are a bit more restricted in terms of their access and the candidate base, and have more of that kind of safe space type feel about them, like Haystack. That sort of mentality is becoming more important and more effective when we're thinking about the platforms and the methods that we're using to approach people. Speed is again, it's more important than it ever has been. The candidates are going to be in multiple processes. They're not going to need to wait for an offer to come from you because they will get other offers. It's that simple. And when we say speed, we mean both in terms of the number of stages, the actual number of physical interviews, but also the overall time that takes, in terms of weeks, and also making sure that our time investment matches the candidates is important. Giving people 5-hour take-home exercises, it's just not viable anymore. If it was ever a good idea, it isn't now. You need to be investing as much time as you're asking from people. Obviously, we've got what's been titled the Great Resignation, which is a bit of a catch-all for kind of how things have changed over the last few years. But fundamentally, that's just a disruption in the market, and disruption is always an opportunity as well as a risk. So the good things for some businesses to come out of that is that candidates generally are thinking more broadly about what they want from a job. The previous automatic draws of like a big tech logo, something like that, it's not where it used to be. It's given smaller businesses a bit of a look in because they can be offering things that people now seek out and consider to be more valuable. The bad thing is that it's just created a hugely competitive and very changeable market. So a lot of our previous assumptions about how things work aren't necessarily true anymore. We're constantly having to address those assumptions. And as the candidates are being more thoughtful about what they want, we have to be more thoughtful about how we offer it and how we communicate it.
There's certain benefits that are expected now as well. So traditionally, pre-pandemics, things such as flexi working had always been something that only certain companies offered, and had previously been a massive selling point for companies. However, in a post-pandemic world, flexi working and remote working is a complete given. People, I don't think, would expect not to have that opportunity to do some hybrid working or remote working. And actually shouting about it has become almost a warning sign now. It's kind of like back in 2018 when people were shouting about pension schemes. And it's been a big culture change for many companies. It's evident that many companies and many market segments just aren't ready to properly facilitate this style of working yet. Salary expectations. So salary expectations for certain roles have shot up significantly, and they're still rising. This has created challenges in advertising, particularly for companies with transparent cultures. For a lot of candidates, it's a primary motivator for them to look elsewhere, as their salary is based on pre-pandemic markets, and they now see their job advertised for 15k more somewhere else. Candidates like this need to be handled carefully due to counter offers. And then we have diversity and inclusion. So obviously this is things that were happening pre-pandemic, but having a line at the bottom of a job ad to say we're an equal opportunities employer is just, it's no longer good enough. We need to kind of show that we are including everybody and inclusive. And we need to be asking those hard questions as well. Why does the industry look the way it does, and act on those answers?
So where do we see opportunities to improve? So this is based both on some things that we've seen in the wider market that we think probably aren't done that well, and also some stuff that we've had challenges with too, and we've had to really think about. So as has been mentioned, it's balancing speed with effectiveness in a hiring process. You've got at both ends of the spectrum here. You've got 5-stage processes that take 2 months to go through and involve lots of take-home work and things like that. And then you've also got some processes that we've been aware of where you've got 2 half-hour interviews and that's it. And people are getting through that in 3 days, which is great from the speed process, but are you actually then assessing those people properly and getting the right people into your business? Because ultimately that's the goal of the hiring process, right? It's about finding the middle ground there of effective balancing of that speed, and also keeping offers realistic and not just throwing money at a problem to try and solve it. So you've got salary inflation going on at the moment, but you have to keep in mind that that's potentially a little bit of a bubble. Probably can't keep going at the rate it's going, right? And may in fact come down again slightly at some point in the future. So the problem there is if you bring in loads of people at these levels, you've got people already in the business who probably aren't at that level. You've then got to either keep everything secret, or you've got to bump everyone's salary up, and you're potentially creating an unsustainable situation there. If we look at one of the other industries that's sort of close to my heart in aviation, you can see the consequences of that recently. There have been some really, really brutal redundancy programs in aviation at the moment. And a lot of the motivation behind that is that airlines were desperate to get rid of a lot of people who were sitting there on legacy contracts from boom times that were just completely out of whack with the market now. And that's created, as I say, these horrendous redundancy programs, a really toxic atmosphere now between employer and employees. And that's something that we really don't want to see in tech. And therefore, I think we have to keep an eye on how we handle this salary inflation.
We also see the mistakes with not keeping hiring managers updated with the current market trends. So we tend to assume that everybody knows what we know, but it's not always the case. A hiring manager who hasn't had a job or hasn't looked for a job elsewhere in like 3+ years is likely to be completely out of touch with the current salary market, especially in a post-pandemic world as well. And this is also really true of those that are involved in the selection process, but not necessarily the primary hire. So if they're using salary expectations to assess how good somebody is, and then this is probably based on outdated information, and therefore the selection process isn't going to be working properly. It's going to be extremely difficult to spot. And then we've got not delivering on the flexible working. So during the pandemic, there were instances of companies installing surveillance software when employees were working from home, and that the level of trust just wasn't there. You've got some companies and CEOs that still believe you need to be at your desk 9 to 5 in order to see the results. And this is a fundamental problem for lots of businesses who assess contribution by how long you spend at your desk. And obviously, we've referenced a tweet that's quite popular at the moment from Alan Sugar talking about people needing to be at their desk in order to do their roles properly.
Cool. So yeah, those are just some of the things that we call out as being, the primary things that we see. Obviously, there's lots more, and I think this is a great opportunity now to go into some more of that with some Q&A. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Really, really insightful stuff. Before we go to the Q&A, can I just jump the queue and ask you about one of the things that you touched on, Ollie, which was, I guess, the market reaching some kind of equilibrium or even fallback in terms of salaries. And I guess over the last 4 or 5 days, we've seen these actual waves of redundancies within tech at businesses like Klarna and Gorillas. And I'm just thinking and I guess they were probably more businesses scaling up, so that maybe it's a little bit understandable that they over recruited and things like that. But I just wonder what you think the dangers are generally, and maybe how other people listening in can kind of help make sure that doesn't become more widespread than it already is.
Yeah, I think it's part of that probably comes down also to how VC dependent a lot of tech businesses are. And that's when you get those oh crap moments when you were expecting these funding rounds to keep coming in, and that's what you were basing your hiring and your scaling on, and then all of a sudden that funding doesn't materialize, and you're in a real problem. It's one of the things that's always been a focus of Gearset is that we're growing sustainably. So we've never grown unprofitably, and that it means that we can always be confident that as long as we're still doing the right thing with our product, we're not dependent too much on anything external to I suppose make our hiring sensible. So we just sort of tend to look at it that way. I mean, that's not going to be the way that everyone wants to run their tech business. We get that, but I think it's certainly the case now that people are going to have to keep a bit of a closer eye and a bit more of a realistic view on where that funding is coming from, and probably look to be running more sustainably.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I agree. I think it's probably a little bit of maybe a little bit of a red flag, or certainly something that candidates, techies need to kind of keep in mind when these opportunities come up with the big salaries. Not that I'm saying don't be excited or don't take them, but maybe just have a look deeper at some of the potential pitfalls which might be there, kind of lurking in the shadows a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Like rapid growth can look great, and often it is great, but
Mm.
you've always got to temper that with looking at how realistic it is.
Yeah, sure. Good stuff. Okay, well let's throw it open now. There were some really good ones coming through. I noticed as you guys were talking. Yeah, I think one of the things that's come in that a couple of different people have mentioned are specifically women and getting more women involved in tech and young people. Just as an aside, we're big advocates of kind of early years roles at Haystack, so we allow early years roles to be advertised for free on our platform. Because I think in terms of the long-term solution to the shortage of software developers, that has to be in my mind, we have to get more people involved at an earlier age. And I guess companies of all sizes really have a responsibility to give young people a chance. But maybe just from I guess from a Gearset perspective, and then maybe what you see kind of overall in the market in terms of getting more young people, more early years talent through the door, and increasing diversity in terms of gender. What do you see there, guys?
So I think with Gearset, we're super open to kind of nurturing that talent. So we offer internship programs. So we hire several interns every year. Most of those interns go back to university and either come back as an intern another year or join us as a full-time employee when they finish their degree. And in terms of it's a tech, it's a wide tech issue, isn't it? In a sense of being much more kind of diverse in terms of gender in the workplace, and it's definitely an issue that has gone on for many years, and hopefully we're kind of seeing more women in tech, and we definitely support things. We join STEM women programs. We like to run our job ads through software to check that our language is very gender neutral as well. We've done research into how men and women perceive certain job descriptions and job adverts out there. And interestingly, it seems that if you've got 10 points, a man ticking 5 of those will probably still apply for the role, whereas a woman wants to tick 9 out of 10 of those before making
Yeah.
the application. And we also highlight women in tech through our business as well. So we've got lots of great women in leadership roles here, and we make sure that we talk about that externally so that people are aware that there's plenty of opportunities for women to join tech businesses and have great careers in tech.
I think the importance there is the emphasis on. You're right. You've got to make it appealing right from the very front end of this process, and that's where the problem needs to be solved. You've got to make it visible that this is absolutely a career that is open to anybody. Make it very obvious so that people are aware of that when they're at the age and this point in their life where they're choosing their careers. Because if you miss them at that point, it's then going to be really tough to solve this problem. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think some of I keep getting told off by our Slack bot for using the term "guys" as a unisex term. I think I've probably done it a couple of times in this call actually. So apologies if I have. But what we found interesting, we found there was a number of our users on Haystack who we asked them, because at the moment they're anonymous, as you know, they can kind of browse around and nobody can kind of reach out to them. But we polled our users to see what percentage of them would, for example, be willing to be visible. And the results were quite interesting. So it was around 35% of people were happy to have head of talent, TA professionals reach out to them. I think the issue with reaching out is probably more the recruitment agencies rather than internal talent professionals. But what was even more interesting was within that 33% of people who were happy to be visible, it was a much higher proportion of men than women. So actually, it seems like the women actually value the safe space, ability to browse. You'll only hear from people that you want to hear from more than men, which I thought was quite interesting. That actually that noise, that bombardment of messages, probably puts women off disproportionately to men.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it feeds into another question which was sort of spotted that's come up as well, which is kind of almost more about neurodiversity rather than gender diversity. And I think it's a problem that's tied in as well. As you say, there are certain types of people who are going to perceive certain recruitment practices in very different ways because of how they think about things and how their mind works. And we can't assume that, oh well, I wouldn't mind seeing this or having an interview set up like this, therefore it's fine. No, you've got to think a bit broader than that. And as you say, sometimes the pushy, aggressive style that recruitment can often sort of engender is really going to be more off-putting to certain types of people than others.
Yeah. Sure.
We try to be very, we try to give people options as well. So when it comes to interviews, that's somebody's option. If you want to have that remote, if you want to have that in the office, it really does depend on the candidate. Some people want to come into the office because they want to see what the workplace is going to be like if they're going to be based in the office. If they're going to be remote, there's no point in bringing them into the office because they're never going to come into the office, but maybe they want to pop in. It's completely open, and we don't assess on things such as body language or eye contact and things. It's much more about, do you have the skills needed to do the job as opposed to anything else. And we're not that sort of tech company that puts kind of arbitrary code out there just for, to test somebody. It's real life solutions that people would be coming in and working on. And it's a very collaborative environment during the interview process. So it's as if you were an employee as such.
It's not sort of putting someone under a grilling, and also trying to do things like minimizing the size of interview panels. For some people, again, sitting there in front of 3, 4, 5 people, that can actually be really intimidating. Someone isn't going to perform that well in that scenario. And do you need all those people in that interview? So it's thinking about things like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really comes down to, I think you want to see people in their best possible light. You want to give them the best possible chance of success, and kind of whatever it takes to make that environment as comfortable where somebody's going to be able to give the best of themselves is to be applauded. There's one just come through on a slightly different topic, which is regarding flexible and remote working. How do we coach organizations to trust employees and allow more flexible work hours? Clearly, it's something that you guys offer, and seem to almost crack the code on that one. What advice would you give more widely?
It's a straightforward answer, but unfortunately one that's really hard to actually do, and it's got to be down to the trust in the culture. That's what makes it work. So it's a short answer, but actually getting to that point is really hard. Gearset, the way that sort of addressed that is just, that's always the way it's been, right? That's how Kevin started the company. It's always been about every single person we brought in. Do we trust this person to work in the way that we work? And therefore, we can allow people a level of freedom and flexibility without having to worry about what people are doing. It's completely up to them, and we're fine with that. But that's easier said than done, particularly if you've started off on the wrong side of things already.
It's when the lockdown hit the first time, it wasn't oh no, we're not set up for this. We were completely set up to work from home because we were always able to, and some people more than others would work from home more, and some people wouldn't. But it has thrown companies into that environment where they've had to, if they haven't done it before, they've had to learn to work from home. They've had to learn to trust their employees, and it's alien to us that then, now that things are open and people can go back into the office, that people are saying, well, you have to be in the office X amount of days a week and you have to work these hours. And it's like, but previously, everything was fine for 2 years when we could work from home and have that flexibility. It's just, for us, it's not much, it's not, we're counting the hours that you do and clocking in, clocking out. It's, we understand that people also have lives outside of work, and as long as the work's done, then there doesn't necessarily need to be a 9 to 5 at your desk. You must be seen to be doing something.
Exactly. It's so Sara was referencing in the presentation there about how a lot of companies still kind of have a culture of assessing input as a means of seeing how well someone's doing, which isn't really what you're after, right? It should be about the outputs. Like if someone's getting stuff done, getting what they need to do done, how much does it matter when they're doing that and where? It's the mentality that needs to kind of come to the fore a bit more.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what's happened post-pandemic. So some companies who maybe previously didn't embrace it have either been forced to, or they've realised what kind of almost what were we doing for all of those years, making people kind of troop into the office 5 days a week. And I think, again, talking to two recruitment professionals now, I guess that kind of trust is something that you look for in a recruitment process. Anyway, I think the first question to ask yourself is if you're worried about people working from home is, well, why are you worried about them working from home? And what does that say about the kind of trust that's there between employer and employee? So, yeah, interesting one. I think it's still got a journey to travel, that one, if Lord Sugar's got his way.
Yeah.
2 seconds. There's one from Charlotte Galbraith here, which is outside of standard sourcing, for example, LinkedIn outreach. What other tools do you use for tech recruitment? I mean, obviously, Haystack's the best out there. We know that.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some other tools we use that are quite similar, to be honest. It is quite a competitive space at the moment, as I'm sure you know. A few people are clocking on to the fact that this sort of thing is required. So there are other tools out there that allow direct approaches in the same way that LinkedIn does, but to a pre-vetted candidate base from a pre-vetted pool of recruiters, all of whom are internal recruiters and not agency recruiters. So tools like that, we pretty regularly see 50-60% response rates on direct approaches, which I'm sure people listening today will compare that to what you can get on LinkedIn these days, and that is orders of magnitude higher. So it's so much more efficient, much more efficient use of your time. And I think that as well as just the tools, it's also about the approaches as well, and what you're doing and how. So I mentioned using follow-up messages and things like that. That is potentially a way of trying to mitigate the impact of just how many messages people are getting these days. If you're the only one that's actually following up with them and sort of continuing to prod them, as long as you're adding value with those messages and following up with more information, you're just more likely to catch them at a moment in time where actually they can pay attention to that message. But yeah, again, it's about balance and not hounding people, of course. So it's just a lot of thought going into how we're approaching people as well as where.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. I guess moving more on to retention. I think we've probably talked a lot about attraction in the actual recruitment process, but one thing that can definitely save on recruitment heartache is if you can retain current employees. Do you feel, maybe you can talk a little bit about Gearset's practices, but in general, do you feel like companies are having to be more creative with benefits, or obviously we've talked about flexibility previously? What do you think are the key factors in kind of keeping staff turnover as low as possible?
We would sort of say, we don't tend to go in that much for like the big sort of flashy, sort of gimmicky perks and things like that. It's like that's I think it's a little bit old fashioned now in tech. It ultimately has got to be about creating an environment that people just love to work in every day. Fundamentally, it's not going to have that much of an impact if you go on a big fancy away day or something once a year if the other 364 days of the year you hate your job. That's more the focus is around us making sure that the day-to-day environment, the group that people are working in, and the job that they're doing are giving them what they want, and just that they really enjoy coming to work and doing their job.
I think companies are trying new things. Previously flexible working was one of our USPs. It was a great selling point pre-pandemic, as come work for Gearset, you have the flexibility to work from home whenever you want, and we're all set up for that. Whereas now, like we mentioned in the presentation, it's a complete given. I don't think most people would take a new role without and be at their desk 5 days a week now. So I think companies are trying to be more creative and thinking about other perks that they can introduce that can kind of take over, I guess, that part. I can't think of any examples of what people are doing, but like Ollie said, it has to be driven from within as well. It can't just be a whole host of perks, but you really hate coming to the office or you really hate logging onto your computer in the morning. There needs to be something more, doesn't there? And I think it's very much down to culture and driving it from the inside.
Yeah. Which unfortunately is harder, right? Which is why you see flashy perks, because that's something actually it's fairly easy to tack on. But yeah, it's an easy option, but not necessarily the best one.
Yeah, agreed. I think a lot of kind of grand gestures there. I think most people it's the day to day. It's kind of how they're treated day to day.
Yeah.
Flexibility not just around hours, but if there's childcare or somebody's poorly or whatever it might be. Um, so yeah, I think you're right. So most people would rather a kind of inflationary pay rise kind of rather than a hot air balloon trip would probably be
Mhm.
more
Yeah.
so
I'm sure they love both, but
Yeah.
if they had to pick,
Yeah,
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 exactly.
I'm sure it's the
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
that's fair as opposed to.
yeah, indeed, yeah. Interesting one around approach to recruiting different, I guess, different professions and maybe different personalities within tech. So,
Mhm.
um, is your approach to kind of software engineers different to your approach to UX UI product designer types as opposed to and then kind of on the product owners, product managers?
Mhm.
Um, I guess without stereotyping, is the approach kind of different there? Is there different things that seem to work better?
Yeah, I would say again, you do have to be careful not to stereotype when you're kind of thinking about this kind of thing. I think we've seen some recruitment approaches that from other companies that were clearly aimed very specifically at devs, but were kind of going at every software engineer must be like a sci-fi geek, right? So they're kind of full of those sorts of references. Like that's not necessarily true at all. So yes, you can change. I think it's mostly about changing your expectations in terms of what kind of communication you're going to have with someone. If we're thinking about a lot of software engineers, like they're very busy, and B, they're quite often people who will do a lot of their communication day to day, not necessarily face to face or on the phone. So you're going to have a lot more of that kind of communication with
Mm,
those people. Whereas if you're recruiting for, say your sales or your customer success functions, those are people who are on the phone all day as part of their job predominantly. So they're going to be much more geared towards that kind of communication. As a rule, again, not you can't completely tar everybody with the same brush, but I think it's more about the type of communication than anything else.
And we're all different, aren't we? So you have to think of, try and put yourself in that person's shoes. What's in it for me? And then have that approach. So is telling somebody that is working in sales that they have complete ownership of their work and they're able to choose their tech stack, etc. Is that going to be as attractive to them, or telling somebody who's in engineering that the salespeople, this is how they work? It's completely irrelevant. You have to
Yeah,
think what's in it for them, what's going to be attractive for that person doing that particular role.
yeah.
How sexy is that role? Why is it
mm,
sexy?
mm. Yeah, interesting. I think the communication one's a really interesting point that you make, Ollie, about the. Uh, I think there's obviously I'm an ex agency recruiter myself, and I think there's a tendency amongst agency recruiters, internal talent people, salespeople to think that everybody's hanging out on LinkedIn all day, where that might be my reality and maybe some of your reality, but there's also a big swathe of the professional population that checks LinkedIn once a week or once a month.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um,
I think again, you mentioned particularly if you come from an agency background, which we both have as well.
mm,
It's one of the first things you get hammered into, right? Is get people on the phone.
yeah,
Not everyone wants to be got on the phone, so that can actually be really off-putting for a
yeah,
lot of people. So
yeah, definitely. There's a few more. We still got a little bit of time left, so let's you can get through as many of these as we can.
you
Um, are you guys seeing equality in pay? Sorry, are you two seeing equality in pay for job offers, male female? So, I guess maybe how does Gearset ensure that that's the case, and kind of is any kind of insight into whether that gender pay gap's closing up a little bit?
Um, yeah, I would say it is tough to judge because we're not a massive company, so the data set that we're dealing with there isn't huge. So
Mm,
it's probably not super reliable to draw industry-wide conclusions on what we have visibility on ourselves. But yeah, I would say so. Knowing the way that we put together offers and how we arrive at a figure for somebody and how we've assessed them through the process. I feel like
mm,
there are a lot of checks in place there to make sure that that is going to be a fair offer, and it would be the same offer for the same level of capability, regardless, not even necessarily just gender, like regardless of, any other person's characteristics. The thing that's zeroed in on always is what's the technical contribution to the role that this person is going to make, and what is that worth to us?
Yeah. Okay. And there's one just come through on salary benchmarking there, and I think maybe just so I'm based up in the northeast of England, and one of the concerns for local businesses that I speak to is regarding salaries, and I guess what the rise of remote working has allowed is individuals based in the north of England to work for companies in the south of England, in London, for example, in the way they've been working for the last 2 years, i.e., from home, and on a lot more money. And obviously, there's the difference between what they were paid kind of by their current company, who can offer the flexible working, but maybe can't offer the salary. So they're seeing a lot of talent drain, essentially. So previously working for more local companies are now working, and in a way, it's that's the labour market as it stands. They have more freedom to move around. So I guess that it's not going back in the box. But in terms of salary benchmarking, how often do you do it as a business? Have you seen any of the? I guess, have you seen any of the issues that maybe some of the businesses up here in the northeast have seen? With people going for higher paid remote opportunities, maybe with businesses in America or in Europe.
Yeah, obviously it's something that I think everybody outside of London has seen is that the problem at the moment is that all of a sudden we're competing with remote London salaries, which is I think potentially, as I said, one of those things that's not going to be around for long, right? Because you've got companies that are based in London offering London salaries, which obviously previously had a very good reason because it was really expensive to live in London. But that doesn't add up if you're offering that salary to someone who lives in the northeast, right? So I don't think that can continue. So we again, this goes back to us being quite careful about what we're benchmarking against.
Yes.
We do benchmark very regularly, particularly in the engineering process. So the engineering team, it's almost a permanently ongoing process because things are moving so quickly. But I think it's not just about looking at what other salaries are out there. So it's about benchmarking yourselves against the right things. Because as I said earlier, you don't want an entire workforce that's paid London salaries, because those London salaries probably aren't going to stick where they are, or keep pace with how everything else is going up.
It's definitely pushed the prices up, though. It's we're no longer just competing in that local market now. We're competing with the rest of the UK, and it's crazy, isn't it, that you no longer just have to look at your local competitors that are next door or across the road, but literally think about every company in the UK that could potentially be looking to hire the same sort of staff as you. And because of that, there is a lot of competition. It has pushed the salaries up, and we have to benchmark internally, externally, just to make sure that we're being competitive, we're retaining people. And like Ollie said, it feels like it's a constant thing at the moment because of the way that the market is.
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree. I think eventually, because also the companies in London that previously paid the premium for people who were based in London, they probably had to have quite a sizable office, probably in a quite prestigious location in order. So I guess if those overheads aren't the same, then there's less of a need to. So I think also there's that. I think also, and I think this probably comes back to a point that we were talking about earlier, is kind of knowing what you're getting into. And we were talking about businesses, maybe VC-backed businesses that were scaling very aggressively. Is what are the expectations going to be if you move for that kind of salary and you're a remote employee? What are the kind of expectations of that company going to be of you as an individual compared maybe to where you are currently? So all worth considering in the round. Interesting. Yeah, back just on remote working, are there any aspects in either the hiring process or the retention process that have become more important as remote working has become more commonplace?
We'll probably say the same thing, won't we?
Yeah, we'll probably say something. There definitely is. I mean, it's something that, in particular, we've had to really think hard about in the engineering team, because we have actually had situations where we've had candidates who would be remote, and ultimately the decision has kind of come down to actually, if this person was going to be in office sitting with the team right next to their team lead who could mentor and coach them all the time, it would be a yes, but actually we don't feel that we can offer them the support they maybe need remotely. So I think that's something that really does have to factor in. I think companies have got to be realistic. This comes back to the whole, making sure your culture is set up for the remote thing. You've got to be realistic about the differences in how much support and coaching you can give somebody remote versus in office, especially if we're talking fully remote here, not hybrid. So yeah, that is something that's cropped up in conversations a lot within engineering, and it is definitely a big factor that we have to keep an eye on.
And I think things such as communication is really key, particularly as a remote employee, because we're hybrid. It's not that we have fully remote teams or fully in office teams, because we don't have anyone that's fully 5 days a week in the office anyway, I don't think. But we have to be able to adapt really easily. And if you're kind of be somebody who's remote or hybrid and you're struggling and you're not communicating that, then it's going to be really difficult to therefore help that person. Whereas if you're communicating and we're having that constant communication, then we're able to help each other out and say, actually, this is how you do this, or this is where this is. Just, especially when you're new to a business, we don't know everything, do we? And it's really key to keep that communication going.
And when we're talking struggling there as well, obviously that doesn't necessarily just mean in terms of their work. It's a huge challenge to get, particularly for a manager that is used to seeing their team face to face in person, on a regular basis, to suddenly be having to speak to people, or potentially never even speak to them face to face, really, and having to assess how they're getting on personally as well. Obviously, it's been pretty tough for a lot of people over the last several years, and that's been really unfortunately combined with situations that make it much harder to spot that from a management point of view. So that's also something that really needs some thinking about when you're setting people up for remote.
Great stuff. Well, we're just about out of time, but that's been really, really insightful. So thanks so much for Ollie and Sara joining us today. It's been, like I say, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Really enjoyed the Q&A, especially. It's been really, really insightful and great to hear from people who are, I guess, at the core face of that tech recruitment. So thanks very much. Thanks to everybody who joined us out there, and for all your questions. We'll catch you again soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.